Hello, everybody. Today I wanted to kind of share with you something that I've kind of been slowly working on in the background. This is kind of more of a self-care model, if you will, for um, understanding, let's say, childhood, teenagers, and young adults, um, and is a bit different than the self-care version for, um, let's say, people 30 and up. The biggest difference between the two kind of models is the 30 and up version takes into consideration the fact that we have cultivated strong rules and regulations around how we live our life, and because they're so sturdy, we can use those to kind of refine the self-care process in the sense that you have enough experience with life to know um, very strongly how past experience influences you and how it's made you make different decisions, and therefore refining that becomes easier in a way by having so much vast experience and already having an idea of what your personality is about in that sense. Now, in the kind of young adult, teenager area, we don't have so much experience. We have more of ideals, we have more of what we want to become, we have more of things that we're striving for, but we have a lack of, let's say, knowing based on experience what it is that we're doing. So, to kind of help orient the struggle more, I said, effectively for that age group of people, I've come up with a kind of working model that I might refine over time, but just to get the basic idea out there, I'm creating this video. So, when addressing young adults, it's important to know that their biggest struggle has to do with the lack of normalcy, right? Because everything is suggested to you, who you are is suggested to you, how you react to things are suggested to you. And in fact, you're building your character or personality off of these things that seem to be very solid because they're very home-based. This is what we do in our family. This is how we take on life in our family. This is how we deal with conflict in our family. This is how we achieve in our family. And all these things have very little to do, generally, with the real world, for a simple way to put it. And a good example of this is, let's say I am the parent of a young adult, and I have this kind of insecurity about playing sports. You know, I got hurt when I was younger, and I don't want my child to get hurt as well. So I take my fare and I kind of push it onto the child, saying, oh, well, be careful. You don't want to really play that. You know, you can get hurt, and you don't want to get hurt because hurt is bad. And you want to be able to go camping this summer, so you don't want to be hurt by playing these sports. And I start to cultivate, unknowingly, really, this atmosphere around being afraid of sports. Now, you can make the argument that the child might rebel against that, and that's possible. And essentially, when children rebel against so many of the kind of norms of the family, they become the black sheep, and that has its own challenge altogether. But we're not going to talk about that in this video. But we'll say that the person or the child starts to comply with these things. The degree to which they comply will vary. Therefore, the challenges with this later on in life will vary in severity. So now, what you've created by way of doing this is an insecure person who's going to have a challenge connecting with their body and pushing it in physical ways, generally. They're going to be more cautious to being hurt because they don't want to be in pain, because this thing they were told was so severe. So there's that thing that builds around that. Well, that seems to be kind of innocent, but how does that play out in the older years of that teenager turned young adult? Now, what happens is there is a group of children that played sports and they gained certain personal characteristics from doing that, and they now embody that experience. So when this young individual tries to interact with those people, they'll feel like they're missing out. They'll feel like something's off. They'll feel weird, awkward, like those people don't make any sense. They'll say, I'm not one of those people, and you see how quickly they essentially shut off a whole, we'll say about 40% of what they could become and who they are in that just sheer statement. Well, that's bad, not too bad, but what then happens more in working life? Um, I'm going to have to face challenges that needed those prerequisites of playing sports, um, for the character development side of that, uh, to take on these challenges. If I'm lacking a whole 40% of how to take on challenges, life is going to become smaller. Anytime that a person becomes smaller than they are, this immediately creates a resistance, a stress, a push towards becoming greater. When we shy away from that, again, generally based on a fear, then a whole bunch of reality starts to, let's say, um, shift into something that's more mirage like. And in creating this mirage, I now don't have an adequate way of actually navigating life. So the people that I should want to be closer to gain this skill, I'll push away. And the people that have less of the thing that I need to cultivate as a person, I'll move towards. And then I will shift away from that growth. And in shifting away from that growth, I become less of myself. And in that way, I start to kind of become a depressed version of who I truly am. And unless something pushes me towards that and I kind of snap out of that kind of mirage, then I'll be stuck for a very long time. And again, we have to think of this mirage playing tricks. So we have an idea what we think exactly what it is, that it is to be athletic, let's say, and there's the actual experience which puts you up here with what's happening. And when you're up here and you know what that's happening, then your reality could be kind of in sync with that. But when it's not there, then we end up making a lot of decisions and choices based on something that's actually negative, based on a lacking of a thing. And when we're lacking in something, we either try to overcompensate and do way more of it to feel like we have it, or we shy away from it and do way less to say that, oh, of course I don't have it, because why would I have it? And this again is only from the distortion of what's normal. So let's put this back into a more succinct way of looking at it. Um, I want to go to a party and hang out with my friends as a young adult, and my parent has a very harsh and mean reaction to the innocent suggestion of wanting to hang out with friends. If we're going to make it reality, and nobody had an emotional agenda, an emotional, let's say, slant to it, the child just wants to be a child and hang out with friends. The adult uh, would see that that's what it's all about, and it's not about the partying and bad environment and all those kind of things, because they raised a good child. Um, and that child's going to be responsible and going to live a little bit of life. So we allow that child to go. They experience things. They make their own opinion. They come back. They talk to the parent about what happened, and if they do it again, if they wouldn't do it again, what they liked and didn't like. And then there becomes a lot of normal conversation about that. Both people have a part to play. Both people have an input. Both people can kind of figure it out as a new thing. But if I just deny the whole experience as an adult, say no, bad things happen at parties, which can be true. Um, but again, we don't want to just take away the whole experience, because it might not happen. We don't know that for sure. Their friends might be different than the friends that we hung out with when we were kids, because we've raised a child that's more aware of the things that we weren't aware of. Even by default, that's what happens. So then we take away a whole way of exploring life based on our prejudices on a situation. And then the child ends up not knowing what a normal response to going out and having fun is. Well, last time I wanted to go out, my parent, to make me do something, and again, the only way to make somebody do something is by a style of fear, unless they do it willingly, and in that case, they wouldn't suggest to go to the party in the first place. But as soon as they make that decision and they want to go, and the parent says, no, you can't go, then there has to be some kind of enforcement. How are you going to enforce something other than fear? Is very tricky. So you will use either the form of fear of you must respect me, the form of fear of guilt, the form of fear of, let's say, fear of emotional abandonment. I'm not going to love you as much if you don't listen to what I say. And all these things now have a certain energy behind the process of wanting to enjoy myself, really, is what it comes down to. the party's the party, but it generally will play out to the blanket statement of, because again, around fear, there's also a little bit of a detachment from the situation. So we have, or how we will remember it is, it's not okay to enjoy myself. If we're in a kind of more stressed out place, that's exactly where it'll go. So keeping that as what it is, then in adult life, when I go to enjoy myself, go out, go to interact with different people, I don't have the kind of social skills that would have been developed in that area. I also don't feel confident. There's a bit of, judgment about it. Well, only hooligans go out and party and have fun like that. I only go to the library. But again, that's lacking of experience. And more fear will build about that because I don't have the skills. And fear, again, is partially the lack of having the skills to take on a challenge. I don't feel okay because I've never done it. I don't have that experience. And we have this building of this kind of scary monster in the distance that we can never make out. But if we get close enough, we realize that it's just the shadow of the plant that's always been in the corner and we've seen 1,000 times. That kind of thing starts to happen. And this image shifting becomes very, very devastating in the parts of your life when you're trying to develop who you are, which is a generally teenagehood and being a young adult. This is where we're really trying to strike it out on our own and figure out what's important to us and how we should follow our path of life and what skills we have to do that. And what appeals to us generally is the most easy thing for us to do, what we're already good at or what people praise us for. And in that way, we can also be shifted from our kind of innate ability to choose as opposed to just go what's comfortable. You must always kind of go against the grain in a certain way if you're going to pick what's best for yourself. You can't just follow other people. You have to make that decision based on how you feel and not past experiences per se. And to do that, you're going to have a very strong personality in the sense of internally created resources. So that again is something that I want to quickly bring out there in the large expression of what the concept is of the self-care version for young adults. This again, self-care in this situation would be restoring normalcy to the responses. So if you had a harsh response, we should show the young adult what a normal response is and why it should be that way and why how they're thinking about it is a little bit off from their experience. The reality is a little bit more relaxed than what they have went through. And if they view it in a relaxed way, then they won't be afraid to build the skills when it's easiest to build the skills to take on life. It's a little bit harder later on in life in the sense that there's more resistance behind it, but in teenagehood you're very pliable, mentally, physically, and emotionally pretty much. And in that way we should do our best to cultivate these things of normalcy. And the idea is that you don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the ideal situation. Again, normalcy is the middle. It's not the amazingly good and it's not the amazingly bad. Or yeah, I guess that makes sense. We want to start for the middle because the middle is where they can make their own decision on it. They're not afraid of doing the thing because of the experience they had, but they're also not, let's say, also bitten by the kind of Midas touch where everything they can do turns to gold, and therefore they have it all already figured out. We want them to be in the middle so that they can see that if they want to go for that thing that they want, they will have to work hard by cultivating their things, and they don't have to be afraid of taking on new things, but they have the resources to take it all on, and everything becomes a lot more clear and solid, and they can build off of that. They can build their life on that foundation. We don't want it to be shaky in either way. So this is something that is very important to keep in mind when working the self-care aspect for young adults and teenagers. Thank you very much for listening, and this is kind of, again, the general idea behind what will be used as a model to create a more specific self-care practice for young adults.